Okay.
Dennis Young here, Primitive Substance. Very special guest, Mattias Olsson. Happy belated birthday. Glad you're on
Thank you.
here. You've been a Swedish player, percussionist, drummer for all types of different type of music. And thanks for coming on.
Thank you. It's great to be
So,
on.
well, let's hear some of your story here about growing up and how you got interested in playing the drums and percussion.
Yeah, in Sweden you have to like learn an instrument from the age of like 8 or 9,
Oh,
and they
okay.
have like the whole like music thing in school is really really important. So everyone has like a chance of picking an instrument. So
Oh,
I picked the drums for I'm not really sure why. I wanted to be a conductor, and you couldn't
oh.
be a conductor when you were 8 years old.
No, I
So
imagine
then it
not.
became so then it became the drums, and I was very lucky to have a Argentinian drum teacher, Freddie Pineda, who was very much into the idea of like if he had a music class, everyone had to play.
Oh,
So
okay.
if you had someone playing the drum kit, then someone was playing maracas or tambourines or congas or whatever. So the whole idea of like a percussion ensemble and how rhythms stick together was like his thing, which
Okay.
also meant that everyone was constantly playing, which is always good instead of having like 9-year-olds sitting around doing nothing, which is like impossible. And it also, I think, it gave us all a kind of a sense of like a community. We're working within like the rhythms and playing together. So I think that was like a really good starting point for me when it came to like playing drums and percussion.
So you got a real foundation there of playing that was really good that when you're young and you have that sense of rhythm in you. So then did you go into big bands first? Is that was your first forte into like music?
I started playing classical music when I was probably like 10 or 11, something like
Oh,
that. And because I mean, as I can read music and everything, it wasn't like that difficult. But so, and then I also started going to like summer camp stuff, which was amazing. But that was like, it was really hardcore because I started doing that when I was, I think, 12 or 13. And you would be playing from, I think, like 9 in the morning until 9 or 10 at night, and doing that for
wow.
10 days straight.
Hmm.
So that was like really, really um, a really big learning experience. And the first year I went, I was horrible. I was so bad,
Hmm.
and because coming from Ekerö, which is just outside of Stockholm, I mean, I was pretty much the only drummer. So
Oh,
people had told me like, "You're amazing, you're so good, you're so great," blah blah blah, and I actually believed them. And then I went to the summer camp and realized that, God, I suck. I'm terrible at this,
no.
which was really a really fast learning experience. And then it became like this stupid thing of, I'm going to show those bastards. So I just
Yeah,
like practiced for a year. So I'm not good out of like talent or anything. I'm good out of spite.
hmm. Now, did you play match grip or did you play the traditional um,
Uh, I've
drum?
always played matched grip, and
Okay,
then occasionally when I play the drum kit, I play traditional, but I do it. So I flip over my right hand.
I see.
So if you do traditional grip, you should do it on your left hand. But the thing is that what I realized that when I'm moving across the kit, if I flip my right hand over, so the stick is like that,
Right,
it opens up my like how I move around the kit in a different way.
I see. Well, I guess it depends on how you learned how to play. I know I learned match grip at first, actually, no, traditional with a Buddy Rich book. I
Hmm.
took lessons for a couple of years. I don't know if you remember those Buddy Rich books, drum chart type of things.
Oh
But
wow!
yeah, that
Yeah,
was hard. That was hard. I was
yeah.
like 12 years old trying to learn
And
that
also,
paradiddles, double paradiddles, and it
yeah,
it
and
was
also the funny thing is like, I mean, when it comes to like Buddy Rich, it's like it's such a like what a drummer and what a musician. So it's like
oh
a really like it's a tall order to go like, yeah, I'm going to learn how to play like Buddy Rich. It's like,
Yeah.
I don't think so.
There's nobody like Buddy Rich. He was great on
No.
the Tonight Show. Did you ever see his appearance on the Johnny Carson show?
Yeah.
Man, playing with the
Yeah.
Carson band, man, he killed it all the time.
Yeah, and also his, I mean, because he always said that he never practiced, which I thought was interesting. That he was like, because he started playing, I think, when he was like 3 years old or something, and he
Right.
never practiced. So,
He did-
but I mean, in one way, I mean, I guess that means that because when you watch him play, I mean, even if he's like, there's showmanship, right? But it looks and sounds pretty effortless, even when he does those like
He does.
really smooth single stroke rolls. It's just like, yep. And because it's got that kind of velvety character, or like
it's that left hand. It's that left hand. The way he played it, it was so powerful and effortlessly. You're right.
Yeah,
it was.
Yeah.
So then, how did you get involved with the progressive music? This band Änglagård. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, that close enough. We'll go for that. Well, I mean, I had played in bands since I was like 9 or 10 with my friends in my class, and we started off just like as every other band, just playing like covers. And we had a really good music teacher when we went to 7th to 9th grade, who was like one of these guys who would just like take us in, and we had like a coffee machine in his office. So we'd go there, like when we had breaks, we'd go there and put on coffee. And he was like one of those guys that had very much this this mentorship, you know. You would come to him with an album and you'd go, can you what is this sound? Where does this come from? And he would be like, oh, this must be a combination of, let's say, a piano and Hammond organ. Oh, okay. And then you go, well, if you like this stuff, then you're going to love this stuff. And then he'd borrow you an album, and we'd always be handing him cassettes. And he would do like, he recorded, I think that was like one of the big things for me was that I gave him like 12 cassettes.
Okay.
And asked him to record everything that the Beatles had recorded. And amongst all of those albums, because I mean, it was like, you know, it was that weird Live at the Hollywood Bowl thing.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, which was not that great, but a good, like a really good document of like what they sounded like. But he also, one of like the really crazy things on the cassettes was that he had like a full album of all the takes of Strawberry Fields Forever.
Oh, wow. That must have been interesting.
So it was like the first acoustic version with John Lennon, and then like with all the overdubs and everything. And I think it was narrated by George Martin, and they put it out for like 2 weeks until someone like sued them or whatever.
Boy.
So what that meant was that it gave me a sort of a very good introduction to record production, and also just like how something isn't just because you start in one spot doesn't mean that you're going to end up there, right?
Right.
So, and just how that track developed into what it became, you know.
Well,
and also at the same time,
go ahead.
And then at the same time, I had like I had my brother's old acoustic guitar, and I had the Beatles complete. So I started learning myself guitar just by listening to the Beatles albums, and then just going through like every album and just learning the songs and taking it from there. So and they're so great because I mean the first songs are like 3 chords, right? And then when you come to I'm the Walrus, it's like 17 chords in the intro or something like that. It's just
it's an amazing song. I mean, it really is groundbreaking stuff. And there was a lot of Mellotron on that Strawberry Fields, and they were, I think, one of the first bands to use a Mellotron.
Yeah, I think I mean, it was like the real breakthrough of the Mellotron, and because after that, everyone wanted one.
Right.
And
exactly.
But I think that the first recorded, as far as I know, I might be wrong. You're going to get like really angry messages like, oh. But the first recording of a Chamberlain, I think, was done by the Tokens.
Oh, I didn't know
who
that.
did The Lion Sleeps Tonight. Yeah, that was
Oh.
like, it's the first recording where someone used the Chamberlain, I think, was the Tokens.
Oh,
And not
I'll have
on
to check that out.
when The Lion Sleeps Tonight. Yeah.
So you were influenced by all these other bands, Italian bands, King Crimson, Genesis, and then that really incorporated in your sound. I could hear all those different time signatures that were really unique.
Yeah, I mean, it was like this, for us, I think it was just this thing of, well, how can we like turn things around? How can we like take this theme and really work on it? Especially on the second album, there's a lot of really good stuff, I think. But it's also interesting because we had like, and I don't know if the other guys would like acknowledge it, but what we would do, which is interesting, which I still use to this day, is like using, if you have a theme or a melody or whatever it is, right? What you can do is that you can, for one thing, you can play it in halftime, right? So if you play it in halftime, it will be going, so the melody goes twice over one bass section, right? Or you can do it in double time, right? Or you can flip it backwards. Or what you can do is that you take half the melody and play it backwards, and then you play it forwards the other half. And all of a sudden you've got like, just within the same theme, you can start like building these pretty textures that sound very complicated, but it's just like backwards, forwards, half speed, double speed, right?
Have you recorded it? Did you record any of that? That must have been interesting if you had recordings of that, the backwards, forwards.
Yeah, but I mean, that is part of the arrangements. That's how we did it.
Oh, okay.
So, and it's just like, yeah, and it's just like such a simple idea, right?
It is.
And it's this thing of how you take a piece of music and you just like spin it around and try to figure out what can we do with this? How can we squeeze out as much music out of this little thing as possible?
Did you guys play a lot in Europe, or was it mostly in Scandinavian countries at that time?
I mean, we played very few shows in the original. In the original setting and everything, I think we did maybe 15 shows altogether.
Okay.
But we were the thing about Änglagård, which I find to be like one of the strongest things about the band, was that we were a progressive rock band who wanted to be a progressive rock band, right? So there wasn't any of this like the guitar player actually wants to play fusion, but he will go along with it for the time being. Or like everyone wanted to play that music in that band in that way, which is like just agreeing on that thing makes like, well, then everything else is pretty easy, because otherwise you have like a band where everyone's pulling in different directions. We wanted to be a progressive symphonic progressive rock band. We wanted to have a Mellotron. We got a Mellotron. We wanted to have a Hammond organ. We got a Hammond organ. We wanted Moog Taurus pedals.
Great.
And we did it.
You needed that sound, really. So you wanted to. That's great that everybody had the same focus. Yeah, that was really important.
And also, we were like, for the second album, we rehearsed. I think it was for 3 or 4 weeks. We rehearsed 5 days a week.
Wow.
For that. And we would and at the time I was also playing with another band. So during the days I would be rehearsing with Änglagård, and then I had another band coming in at night that I played with. And then I used to practice 1 or 2 hours before Änglagård showed up. So there was a lot of drumming going on.
That sounds. Now, where'd you record everything at? Did you have your studio yet, or would you have to go to a studio?
No. And there was a studio out in Åkersberga, which is about 1 hour outside of Stockholm, where this guy who had an old barn that he had like rebuilt into a studio, and he was an interesting guy. But I mean, those first 2 Änglagård albums taught me a lot about how to record an album and also how not to record an album.
Oh, okay.
So that like it was let's
hear what was the how to and how not to. Let's hear What did you learn from that? That'd be interesting to hear.
All right. For one thing, what the engineer and producer, or I mean, that was his role more or less, or more like an advisor, I'd say. What he'd always do is that when we came to the studio, we'd always like have coffee and cake, right? So it was never this thing of just like rushing into the studio, just starting immediately. Every hour costs money, because I mean that isn't like the way to create a relaxed and creative environment. If everyone's thinking about time and money, you're going to like, you know, that it won't turn out that great. How not to record an album? Well, the thing is, for one thing, there was like actual like bullying going on within the band, which was really shitty. But also this thing of, I mean, if you fucked up, it wasn't unusual for someone to like run into the studio and go like, "You fucking asshole! Don't you understand how much that mistake cost the band?"
Oh boy!
Do you realize how you're wasting our money with your shitty playing? And it's like, how are you supposed to play well after that?
No, you're not.
Someone tells
you'll be under pressure, and then nothing good's going to happen. Right? I've had that.
No,
for sure.
So, and also this thing of, it was just like a very, very hard and toxic environment a lot of the times, and which I felt was, I mean, it's always like that because it comes down to like insecurities, and it comes down to lack of communication, right?
Yeah.
So if someone's really worried and stressed out over money and time, instead of saying, all right, we really need to like, we need to plan this, we need to rehearse more, we need to do this, we need to like set things up in a way that we can be as creative and as fast as possible. Instead it came out as like anger and tantrums and guitars flying over the rehearsal rooms and all of that. And that was like, and so it was like this kind of thing. Like I think everyone was like practicing a lot just so that you wouldn't get any like crap. Oh. So it was more about like trying to avoid getting into an argument. So, and it was just sad because I mean nowadays, I mean, I think that recording is like so fun and exciting, and it should be like, it's sort of like an exploration more than like just like ticking off shit on a to-do list, right?
Yeah. Well,
but I mean, we were young. We were young, and we didn't really know what we were doing. So
I felt the same way when I recorded with Liquid. We were under a lot of stress because we didn't have a lot of recording time budget. So it was a tension to get it done.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, even though you practice hard enough and do it, it's still not that warm feeling. And then I've had issues with engineers too. Don't touch that gear. Don't touch that board. You know, very too particular, too much.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, and it's also this kind of thing where I always felt like, because first I recorded with Änglagård and we did those 2 albums. And then I joined Pineforest Crunch and we were like on a major label. But it was like back in the day where, I mean, they would like give you a good budget. So we'd have like a month at this amazing studio in Stockholm. So we could actually try doing things and experiment and like have fun with it. But the thing is, I think that as soon as you have like, if you got like budgets and time, if you've got that on your mind when you're recording, it's going to be a problem. But the thing that I felt was that the weirdest thing about it was that it felt like music and recording was something incredibly fragile. It was something that, no, you can't. Oh, if you push that fader up to 5, you're going to wreck the whole thing. And you're like, can we try 5? Can we try 4.5? You know. So when I started recording at home, you know, I always, it was just like complete break every rule, everything that people have told me, like, oh, you can't use a spring reverb on snares because it will just go boing. You go like, okay, I'm going to try. I wonder what a spring reverb and snare like. And you listen to it and go like, Yeah, it works fine. Maybe not for everything, but for certain things, it sounds great. All right, we'll do that. And just like messing with stuff. And
Yeah, well,
because
you have all
music,
the time too. You're in a comfortable environment. You're home. There's no budget on the time isn't clicking for money, and
no,
more things come out, more great music.
yeah, and oddly enough, when it's like that, you work faster as well
Yep.
because you're relaxed and you're just going to do it. And it's this thing of just like having the time to spend that extra 30 minutes or 40 minutes on an idea, and then you go like, all right, cool. And a lot of times, even if it doesn't work immediately, I'll just go like, okay, this idea goes into the toolbox. I'm just going to save it for later because now I know how that works. And then once again, when an artist comes in with an idea or goes, I want to record something and I want it to sound like this, then that idea that's in the toolbox might be perfect for that thing.
Right.
But you have to have like the time to like really get into it. And also, as soon as I had my own studio, it was this wonderful thing of like recording one day, and at 6 or 7 o'clock at night or whatever, I'll just walk out, come back the next day, and everything is identical, right?
Right.
I don't have
exactly.
to clean it up. Everything can be just like more or less plugged in the way it was, and then you just go, right?
Yeah, the
So that
automation
was,
makes such a difference. You know, before you had to set the levels up for each mix, and then it's gone that day, and then you have people on the board trying to get their levels higher. It was
yeah,
quite an adventure back then.
yeah. But on the other hand, I mean, if we're going to talk about like the strong points of that was that if you had like 24 channels or 36 channels analog tape,
Right.
the thing was that you had to really fucking get your arrangements down. You had to
Exactly.
figure out, all right, if we only have 2 channels for percussion, if we only have 3 channels for keyboards, all right, how are we going to do that in the best way, right?
Right.
And because you can't reset the EQ for every section, so you had to really learn how to work with the medium in that way. And I think that in a lot of ways, I still work in that kind of analog way of thinking about it, and like how little do we have to record to get the maximum effect of what we're recording. Because on my own albums, which I find to be interesting, is that there's no extra channels. There's nothing extra on there. There's no safety takes, right? Because that was like one of the things that I always heard when I recorded in the big studios with like people who knew what they were doing, supposedly. It was like, no, we record everything clean, and then we'll fix like the effects and everything else in the mix, right? Yeah. I work in the complete opposite way now. Everything is recorded exactly the way I want it to sound immediately. So if something's going to be super compressed, I'll record it super compressed. If something's going to be distorted, I will distort the hell out of it from the start. Because as soon as I like paint myself into a corner,
right,
everything else I do is going to be adjusted to that first sound I recorded, right? And then all of a sudden, what that means is that you're getting into like almost a symphonic way of thinking of how you like link sounds to each other. And if you can't hear it when you're recording it, if it's not cutting through, it won't cut through afterwards anyways. So you have to like be smart about how you construct everything production wise. And I always, I still view it as I see an EQ a bit like a symphony orchestra. Every instrument has a specific sonic profile that needs to fit in everything. And I never record anything that I don't need.
So you went over to England to record your second record with Jim Warren. How'd that work out? A Radiohead engineer?
Yeah.
How was he to work with?
Great. He was good. He was very opinionated. He had a very like a very like idea of like we're going to do it in this way. And also, which was cool, was that as he'd worked with Radiohead, and I mean, he produced High and Dry, and we worked in their like project studio in Oxfordshire. He was like super open-minded about like sound and all of that, and also when it came to, I would say that mostly when we were like recording guitars,
Right.
he would be like, all right, so this is how Johnny Greenwood did this sound on the bends. This is how the keyboard sound on this OK Computer track was done. So if you want that, we can. It was very easy. We had like that complete like library and his experience of that.
That must have been great to get that experience with somebody like that.
Yeah, yeah. And also, so it was really interesting. And but then we were like bouncing ideas back and forth with like the inspirations we had, even if it didn't necessarily come out on the album. But I mean, we were listening a lot to like Talk at the time, and a lot of like so many influences went into that album. And also, but it was kind of interesting because I remember one time when I was recording one of those, you know, the monkey drums.
Oh yeah. Yep.
That you spin and the two little balls hit the head when you're spinning it.
Right.
And I said like I'd like to do like 10 or 12 of these, and they were going to like slow down. So I'd start playing fast, and then they would just like randomly slow down. And they just asked me, so like what are you like going for? And I told them that I want it to sound like if you were pouring frozen peas on a hardwood floor. That is the effect that I'm going for the section. And I think the engineer was just like, yeah, so why don't we just go out and buy frozen peas and pour them onto a hardwood floor?
Oh, that's pretty neat. Oh, that is pretty wild.
Because it was like, that was the sound I had in my head. And I was like, I can do it in 12 takes on the monkey drums. And we'll use different microphones and different panning and do all that. They were like, just go out and buy the fucking peas. That would be faster.
Well, you know, you've done so many records. I looked up your discography. Wow. Now, a lot of these were recorded at your studio. The records that, wow, a lot of bands, a lot of things.
Yeah, and I mean, now I'm in Rome, where I've worked with I've worked with Italian bands. They're both recording in Rome, and also like recording stuff at my place, and then touring with Italian bands. And I mean, I'm incredibly grateful that I've gotten the opportunity to work with so many different artists, because it feels like, even if I'm like often in a kind of like a producer seat or whatever it is, I constantly feel that I'm like learning from, like, every artist has their own like little thing that they do that is super unique. They go like, you just like, it's constant learning curve, and just like realizing that over and over again that there isn't just one way of doing it. I mean, there's so many different routes you can take and so many different ways of doing things. And so, I mean, that's been, I think, for me, like a very important thing, to like not getting into this kind of thing or going like, no, this is the way we're doing it. Because you realize all the time that, well, there's 1,000 ways of doing things.
Right.
10,000.
True. I agree.
And being just like, trying to like stay humble and grateful for the fact that people are still calling, right?
Yeah, well, you're doing something right. What's the scene like in Italy? Like the music scene, is there a lot of good bands coming out? Do they have? I'm sure they have to play a lot now to make any money in music these days.
I mean, as far as I know, the progressive scene is like really rough now. It's hard for bands to like get signed, and it's hard for bands to get out and get shows. But when I've played with bands here, I've played with like Swedish bands, and I've played with Italian bands, and the audiences are always great. I mean, they're like super positive and supportive, and they're like it's just always a wonderful like experience playing in Italy. So I would say that in Sweden, the audiences are slightly more reserved, you know, as they're
Right.
Scandinavian.
Yeah.
And but still, and then just the whole like scene is smaller than it is here.
It's very hard these days. Are you on? You get any sales from Bandcamp at all on with your music, or there's so much out there? It's very hard to get noticed.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, there's different ways of viewing that as well, I think, because I mean, I think I heard some statistic that there's like 200,000 new songs every day on Spotify,
Oh my
right?
gosh. Right.
So that number is kind of daunting, right?
It is.
But what I've realized, or like an important thing to me, is to take care of your audience, right? That
Right.
you realize that if it wasn't for them being there listening and buying the records and all of that, it would be very, very tough, you know, even if you're not necessarily doing it for like standing ovations or like money in your bank account. That's not really how, at least not, that's not how my creativity works. But just making sure that you're taking care of people. And
Right.
I always,
Agree.
when I send out albums to people, I always like write a letter to every person who buys an album.
That's
And
important.
yeah, and it's just like realizing that, seeing that. I mean, we are doing it together, right?
Right. Of
And
course.
it goes for everything else as well. So if you take care of me, I'll take care of you, right?
Now, do
And
you
it's a
still do you
constant
still
building thing.
do you still put out vinyl or CDs, or it's just mostly digital recordings?
I put out CDs. I put out a fair amount of vinyl. The Italian bands always put out on vinyl because the Italians love vinyl. They're like,
Okay.
it's a big thing. So, but for me, it's always been this thing of like coming from a vinyl background. I always thought it was like something really magical to like when you put on the needle on the record and you sat with the cover
All
and
right.
you
I
like
remember
read
those
the liner
days.
notes
Yep.
and you try to figure out what the fucking Mellotron was or what is a 12-string guitar or whatever, you know. And you try to figure out. It became like almost a. It was such a bigger experience than like just clicking on a track on Spotify or something like that. So
I
I'm
agree.
constantly, when I put out CDs, I always have that in mind, because I also think that if you're gonna try to, it's a horrible word or a horrible something like that. If you're gonna try to sell stuff, right? You're gonna try to sell something. It makes it so much easier if you have, for one thing, if you believe in what you're selling, right? If you believe in the
Right.
music you've made, if you're proud of that, that simplifies things. But also always having in mind this thing of like the audience, who the person who buys this album should get like something more, right? I always
Right.
believe in giving people something extra, because it's just it's that important. Because I'd rather have, like, now I have like a fairly small but very loyal audience
Oh,
who I
okay.
have a constant communication with, and it's a dialogue back and forwards all the time.
That's
So
really nice.
yeah, and I mean, I really, really value that, because it makes all the difference. And I think also one thing that is also a problem today, now I sound like this whiny old guy,
No,
which
that's
is great,
okay.
is that when people stop playing live, right? Because there's a lot of prog bands that don't want to tour because it's too expensive and it's like a hassle. And there's, especially if you're touring in the US, you have to have like work permits and you have to like
Right. Right.
all of that. But the thing is that I've realized like the work that I get and the audience that I've built come from playing live.
Right.
And
I
and
agree.
you do the show, and then you go to the merch table and you talk to people, and you're having a great time, and and they might show you stuff or tell you stuff like, have you heard this band? Have you seen this? Do you know what this is? Blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden, everything from that starts growing. And then maybe you play a show and someone sees you play and go like, that guy, we need that guy for this. And then it just grows naturally, because just sitting at home won't
No, not in this day and age. No, in this day and age, you have to get out there if you're a
yeah,
band. If you're
yeah,
not getting out there to play, you're right. You're going to get caught up in all these other thousands of bands out there that are on the internet, where people are just checking them for like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and on
yeah,
to the next. So
yeah,
you're right. You have to build a following.
yeah. And
I think that's the only way.
but I mean, it's also because that was like one thing during COVID that people got in touch with me and were like, oh, couldn't you do like a streaming concert or something from the studio?
Right.
And the thing was that I felt very strongly like I don't watch streaming concerts, because you listen for like 4 minutes, 5 minutes, and then you might go to the kitchen to get a cup of coffee or something, and then you pick up your phone.
Exactly.
You maybe got a message, right? And then 20 minutes later, you might watch another 2 minutes, whatever. That never happens if you go to a live show, right? If you're standing in the audience, seeing someone performing, it doesn't have to be music, or it could be theater or whatever. You're there. And there's like this full onslaught of impressions, and you're like checking out the musicians. What is the bass player doing? And how does that connect with this? And you don't get that with like streaming stuff. So I was just like, well, I'm not a consumer of streaming concerts. Therefore, I should not do streaming concerts, because it's not, I wouldn't buy the product, so I can't sell the product, right?
It was great. I went to see the Musical Box. Have you seen them, the Genesis?
No.
Oh, they're incredible.
But they're pretty hardcore, right?
Yeah, they're hardcore. Everything, the costumes, everything. But what was really nice is there was no video and no photography allowed. So the show did not have any of these annoying people with their phones up like this, and it was actually really nice to see. I mean, I have nothing against the phones, but a lot of people at some of these shows just are phone happy. It's constantly streaming, but I don't know. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah.
I mean, I think if I did any shows,
it was interesting because I mean, I've seen. I went to see King Crimson when they played in Stockholm, right? And they had this thing. There's no filming and no photography allowed.
Right.
But they say that when Tony Levin picks up his camera, you can pick up your camera, right? So after the show, he will pick up a camera. He'll take pictures of the audience or whatever, and then it's okay to take pictures. And then 2 weeks after I saw King Crimson, I went to see Björk play.
Okay.
And then it was complete like cell phone bonanza, everyone filming. And I just realized how annoying it was.
It is.
Because
it's totally.
When I went to the King Crimson show, you were completely focused on the band and the music. And you were there. And you weren't distracted from like scrolling through like filters or like apps on your phone. You were actually there seeing the band. And I thought that was like, because when I saw Björk 2 weeks later, the contrast was like really startling, because it was just so I just realized that King Crimson got it right about that.
He did. And it was nice. They had people going down the aisles that worked there. When somebody tried to pick up a phone, hey, no phone. And it was beautiful, because you did concentrate on the show, not fiddling with your phone. Oh, what message is this, or who I have to talk to? So unfortunately, it's the world we live in. It's what we live. What are you going to do? You just have to work around it and do the best you can.
Yeah.
So what do you
also, I mean, the other thing is, of course, I mean, because I always say this to the bands that I work with, is like actually in a way the opposite of that argument is the fact that, I mean, if you do a show and it's a small show, let's say it's like 150 people or whatever, 80 people.
Right.
But if you film the show and you put it online, all of a sudden you can have 10,000 people watching the show, right?
Right, that's true.
And then you have like a document of the show, and it's going to be there for, well, as long as YouTube will be up. And then you have this this great opportunity of spreading your music and letting people like see what it is you actually do. And I find that to be like really interesting, just this thing of like, you can actually go and say like, oh, what do you guys like live? And you just go like, click on the link. This is what it sounds like.
Right. Well,
and
that's
hopefully
true.
that's
You're
a good
right.
thing.
I mean, it's a balance there, I guess, you know, it's a balance. Like if you go to a movie too, same thing. People are constantly checking their phones. You know, but what are you going to do? So what do you plan on doing this year? What's your plans in 2025 with projects?
Oh, there's a lot of stuff going on. I'm not really sure. I mean, I'm not going to be like a tease or anything like that. It's just because I don't really know. But I'm finishing my 8th solo album, and I'm working on that now.
Oh, great!
Which is a lot of fun, but it's also really frustrating because it's kind of the thing. What I'm doing in a way is that I need to finish the album so that I can like just get it off and like clean out the machines and everything.
Right.
Because it's also when you work, because now I've been working like pretty solid for 2 years with working with bands and everything. And then after a while, you kind of get this, even if it's like great bands, great music and all that, sometimes you just feel like, no, I need to do my own stuff. I need to do stupid recordings of my ideas so I can just get them out of my system and get the energy to go back to doing the other stuff as well, because everything sort of enriches everything else. But so I'm finishing my own album, and that should be out maybe in a month or two or whatever, depending on how fast I get it done. Then I'm doing a lot of drum sessions where I'm working with Italian bands and a band that is like split between Greece and Sweden. Then I have a Norwegian, an old Norwegian prog band that I probably will be drumming for as well.
Oh, great!
And then
you're busy.
So everything's just connecting into each other, and also, I mean, it's just like so much fun. I've been playing a lot of drums lately. And also, I'm also playing live with a couple of different bands as well. So it's been a lot.
That is great. Now, if you could send back to me the links that we could find all this music, because I'm sure fans out here would love to hear your music. I've got a lot of subscribers that love progressive music, and artists like you are just glad you came on. It's great to talk to you. Do you live in Rome now? Is that, do you actually live in Rome, or you go back and forth to Sweden?
Oh, no. I mean, now it's just like we're here for the weekend, just. And so this is like an Airbnb in like downtown Rome, which is wonderful. But it was also, so last night I met a lot of Italian friends that I have from like when I recorded and played with bands here. And also the interesting thing is one of the guys that was there at dinner last night, he was the first guy to play Änglagård in Italy at his record store. So it was like that connection of, he was like the first guy that championed the band in Italy, which was really amazing. But also,
Italian, they love progressive music, the Italian audience.
Oh, yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. But I mean, it's also this thing of, I think, within the prog community. And I mean, it became, especially when it started off like with MySpace and everything, when you realized that you could actually get in contact with people, you could find people online,
right,
and then strike up a conversation about music or whatever it was. So I mean, I was very lucky to get to record with Tom Doncourt from Cathedral.
Oh yeah, I've heard of him.
Yeah, And I mean, he passed away a couple of years ago. But I played on his solo albums, and we did an album together, which was just this, once again, this remarkable thing of like, he had a studio on Long Island. And, you know, I'd be lying down on the couch because I would usually record during the day. And then at night he would do like keyboard stuff and all that. And I was like lying on his couch in the living room, and I could hear him play like the Mellotron that he used on the first Cathedral album.
Oh, wow. That must have been
and I was just lying there listening to this amazing musician playing like the instrument that, like, one of the most like important like inspirations for Änglagård. And I was like, I can't believe, I'm like, how did this happen? This is just crazy that I get to like experience this thing. And so that was like, once again, one of those things where it just like naturally evolved into like a working relationship, and we became very good friends as well.
That is great. Yeah, you've been, you know, you got to have a little bit of luck, but you've got the talent too. So that nobody's going to call you unless you're good, and you are good. So they're not going to say, they're not going to pick up the phone and say, come on down to do a little drumming or whatever. But
yeah, I mean, it's. I think that you have to have a certain kind of. I mean, I've been very, very lucky and blessed, and the fact that people get in touch and I'm doing what I'm doing, I pinch myself every couple of weeks and just go, shit, I'm so happy I get to do this.
Yeah, that is great. Well, I've been very lucky to get so many great artists to come on this series. I didn't expect to do one or two of these. That's it, and it's growing into like this whole big series, and I think it's important for people to hear you and other artists, you know, to get your name out there more. It's important.
Yeah.
And
wonderful.
I'll continue to do it, and maybe we could connect again when you have some new projects that come up.
Definitely. Wonderful.
Well, this has been great, and you have a great weekend in Rome, and happy belated birthday. And
thank you. Thank you.
Anyway, thanks for coming on, taking the time.
Thank you.
Okay.